Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and today on the podcast, there's a shift in coffee culture happening globally. It's not happening exactly the same everywhere we go, but there's definitely a shift happening. And in today's episode of the Daily Coffee Pro, we are going to take a look at what that means for the global coffee industry, whether it's in specialty coffee or not, and what that means for 2022. There are a lot of challenges coming in 2022, but I personally am convinced that there's a lot of joy to be found in a lot in the coffee industry next year, but it's going to require you being very consciously aware of your position from a cultural perspective and what role you want to play in affecting culture and business and professionalism in 2022, particularly with regards to supply chain. Before we get started, if in 2022 you are interested in engaging the services of a consultant in the coffee industry, for whatever part of the industry that you need help in, consider heading to the show notes and checking out Mapper Forward's consulting services. So, coffee culture, how is it shifting in 2022? It's a great question. What I have noticed in my 20 years in the coffee industry, but all of it in the specialty coffee industry, is that we've had this kind of undertone of specialty coffee being more important, more elitist than everyday coffee. People like to separate them out as third wave and second wave. And third wave kind of had this idea that it was the real way that you should be drinking coffee, despite the fact that the majority of people drink coffee the second wave way. And so where is that shifting as 2022 approaches? Well, what we saw in 2020 and 2021 is that a lot of general cultural ideologies were questioned and challenged and have really started to shift. People are questioning the way that they engage their time with their work, how they're valued in the workplace, the way that they spend their money, the way that they earn their money, the way that supply chains have constrained business owners. They're now asking themselves, is it worth being in business? Consumers are questioning the way that they participate in their buying practices. Consumer behavior is dictating a lot of the way that the coffee industry is shaping itself. You've also got this intergenerational decisiveness of the way that they want to participate in coffee culture and what's important to them. Never before in history has it been so okay to have an opinion and an ideology that you want to attach yourself to. And I think this is wonderful. And I think that this is going to continue to shape the culture in coffee. For me, and for the kind of way that we approach things at Map It Forward, open-minded, critical thinking, where you kind of approach everything as non-ideological. So I'm not a fan of attaching yourself to a particular way of brewing coffee or a particular way of, attaching yourself to a group and attaching yourself to a movement and attaching yourself to specific things. I'm a huge fan of thinking for yourself and having empathy for the community. Not at the expense of yourself, not the expense of your business, not at the expense of your employees. I'm a big fan of considering what it is that you don't know and getting yourself educated without the education coming from one tribe or the other, a political ideology or the other. I'm a big fan of two particular values in the way that we do business. One, integrity, and two, clarity. And so what I'm starting to see shifting in the culture of coffee is that people are starting to attach to groups. And we're going to see that more and more in 2022, and dare I say, say into 2023. And the main reason for this is because it is my deep belief that economically, 2022 is going to be far more challenging than 2021, and 2023 even more challenging than 2022. And so people, when they start to feel stressed, people, when they start to feel unsafe, flock to groups. And group thinking is something that I have just lost many, many friends to over the last couple of years. I have observed that people who are listeners of this podcast are the kinds of people who are working desperately to try and figure out for themselves what they believe to be true about the world and what they believe to be untrue. And they're trying to seek trickery. They're trying to avoid the trickery. And they're seeking it so that they can identify it as no longer having integrity and they can move on from it. So in coffee, what we're starting to see is brands out there trying to cultivate this idea of tribalism. There are brands out there that are trying to engage the services of whether it be influencers or whether it be media outlets, whatever it is, to hijack your way of decision making. And this is happening in the media in general. It's happening with corporations in general. As this shifts into 2022, it is very obviously having an effect and an impact on the coffee industry. What we're finding is that businesses are super stressed. Businesses are, even if they're doing incredibly well, they're super stressed because there's no coffee out there. It is getting increasingly harder to find coffee. So if you're a business that's doing super well, the stress coming from your supply chain and having to pay exorbitant amounts for the little coffee you can get access to is a stress that is unbearable for many people. So in 22, what I see is going to happen is that we're going to have a shift in culture that starts to expose a lot of the underlying, what I like to call fuckery. It's going to expose brands and influencers and people in general who either don't know what they're doing or who have been pretending about what they're doing and are seeking to be parts of groups and follow influencers or hero worshippers so that they can just find somewhere to feel safe in. And unfortunately, what's going to happen, they're going to realize that those people are not the safe place. In fact, the only real safe place is within oneself. If you're a great business operator, if you're a wonderful professional, if you work hard, if you respect people, if you are an independent thinker, if you're not attached to particular coffee ideologies or in general, I mean, everything that I'm saying here applies to the outside world as well. It's one of those things that I genuinely believe that 2022, while there will be a lot of joy to be found in it, will inject a significant amount of stress into all of our lives. And this is going to be a time to cultivate grit. This is going to be a time to simplify. This is going to be a time to check that the relationships that you have are solid and that they are ones that you can count on. I genuinely believe that we are about to learn a lot about the relationships that are left standing in our lives. A lot of the supply chain relationships have been sorted out quite significantly this year. And who knows what's to come. But what I do see is that as there is a mass exodus of people leaving the labour market in coffee, There is a shift in culture. As businesses are closing, there is a shift in culture. And as to how that culture settles, I'm not sure. But what I do see happening concurrently with all of that is that people are starting to question, what actual value do these people bring into my life? What value does such and such influencer inject into my life, particularly at really challenging times? What is going to be important is to see who are the brands that really show up. Who are the influencers that really show up? And as our culture moves predominantly online, it is going to be important for us to assess what role we want to play in that. Interesting times ahead. Really, really interesting times ahead. And in the upcoming episodes, I'm going to be talking a lot about how we're going to be wrapping up a lot of things for this year and share with you how we're planning for 2022 as a business, and me personally, how I'm planning for 2022. So stay tuned. I hope you have found some of this helpful. Peace, love, and peanut butter, friends. Don't forget to subscribe and click the little notifications bell on YouTube or on podcast listening apps to make sure that you get notified. Have an amazing rest of your day.